Welcome to another episode of the David and Goliath Podcast. Here with my partner in crime, Stan Gipe, and we have with us an esteemed guest today, Mr. Bobby Axelrod. Casey Gard. Casey, I had you on 2 years ago, and Casey comes over from the private equity world. He was a hot shot in the finance world, made his way into legal finance, and we became pretty good friends about almost 3-4 years ago now. And we built up a pretty long-term relationship. And I know your thoughts, and this is kind of going to be a hot button issue as we get into it today. We look at the landscape now in the legal field, and we're seeing a lot of turmoil, if you will, about the legal finance industry as a whole and how the bar looks at it, how a lot of our opponents who are pushing tort reform look at it. I want to get into that. As we sit here today, what does it look like to you? Has this become a less attractive industry, an asset class, or are you still as excited about it today as you were before? And then give the audience also an overview of who you are and what you do.
Sure. So in terms of who I am and what I do, Matt, you touched on the fact that I've been in the finance arena for many years. I've been in the finance arena for 30 plus years. I've been an investment manager for the last 25 plus years. I've managed all sorts of investment vehicles, hedge funds, private equity, etc. Entered into the litigation finance world through our family office about 7.5, 8 years ago. And in regard to Matt's question regarding the outlook, am I excited about it or less excited? We're super excited about litigation finance. The foundation of our view on litigation finance and what's exciting about it has actually remained the same, in the sense that when we look at this as a investment vehicle, when we look at this as a industry poised for growth, we look at it through one lens. That lens is, this is a large addressable market in terms of personal injury litigation, and it's an underpenetrated market. So that is exciting to us. The excitement stems really from the foundational view of the structure of that market. The U.S. personal injury litigation market, there's estimates that had suggested to us that you could see on an annual basis a couple of $100 billion a year paid out in personal injury known settlements. The other estimate that we wanted to understand was, how penetrated is that? How saturated is this environment? How much capital is being deployed to the legal industry? And the estimates that we came across there suggested that it was just a few $1 billion on an annual basis. So if you think about that, a few $1 billion being deployed into an industry that's facilitating a couple of $100 billion known settlement dollars, that to me translates into large addressable market, underpenetrated. That's an environment that I like to be part of. In terms of what has maybe changed the last few years, and there being some differing views on it, I would say this environment is probably a function of what some other asset classes have seen the last few years. There's been a tremendous amount of global liquidity. And when there's a tremendous amount of global liquidity, that liquidity makes its way around to different asset classes and looks to deploy that capital. So this industry has certainly seen some of that, where we've seen an influx of capital. And when you see an influx of capital into any industry, I think what comes out is the fact that there are going to be perhaps some bad actors in most, if not all, industries. And I think that's some of what Matt is alluding to, which to me doesn't make this industry different than any other industry. But what it reminds us of is we need to stick to our disciplines in terms of investing disciplines. The law firms that we work with that we try to really filter out into the highest quality law firms need to stick to their disciplines. And as long as we all are doing that, I think we can avoid some of the potential minefields or bad actors that are out there. And I think that causes some of the views from some folks out there to develop. And when they focus on some of the negative events that occur, whether it's on the lead generation side or lawyers, law firms, and any activity that they're doing that upsets some of the regulators, that's going to lead to some scrutiny. But at the end of the day, I think regulation and scrutiny at times is good, because that cleans up an industry and that gets an industry back on the right track. So I'm not dismayed by regulation or potential reform that's out there, because I think at the end of the day, it makes the industry better, cleaner, and more aligned with the folks that are in charge of setting the regulations.
But I get your point. The regulation's fine, but let's look at what just happened in Los Angeles with that firm DTLA and the fraudulent sex abuse claims that have tarnished an otherwise commendable settlement for $4 billion on behalf of sexual abuse survivors that now is receiving intense scrutiny. Whenever there's intense scrutiny, in whether it's the DTLA issue or the Uber rideshare sexual abuse assaults, where they now are going after the funders. Why are they always going after private equity companies that are coming to the law? What scares them? And I know what their argument is going to be, and I don't support this argument. I think what I feel. I'm in the same side of the fence as you do. But they're always going to say that the more equity, the more money that comes into the field, the more advertising there is, and the more bullshit claims there are, and it brings out all the bad actors. Do you bring out the bad actors, or does your field bring out the bad actors? And when they say all these fraudulent claims, wouldn't we all go out of business if it was all fraudulent claims?
And I think those are all fair points. And yes, the DTLA situation is unfortunate, and it's a good example of what sounds like some bad actors getting involved in a cause. At the end of the day, the one consistent point that I hear from high-quality lawyers and law firms like DLG and various other ones that we interact with at the end of the day is you all are more concerned with your clients and justice for your clients than anything. And that is consistent across the board when we're talking with high quality lawyers. And I think over time, that sort of works itself through the system, and it becomes apparent to the regulators. It becomes apparent to the folks that are, tasked with whether it's policing the industry or just cleaning up the industry and alleviating it from some of these bad actors. At the end of the day, the most important participants in this industry, it is consistent across the board that they're not out there just focusing on, let's get this settled, let's not even think about going to trial. What I hear consistently from the law firms that we are fortunate to be dealing with is everything to make sure it is at the benefit to the clients. And I think when you have an industry that's led by folks like that, they overtake the bad actors. There's going to be some speed bumps, right? There's going to be some hindrance, but I think the private capital that comes into the market, when it's deployed effectively, when it's deployed with high quality leaders in this industry, that even accelerates the cleaning up of this. I would say that one characteristic of this industry is that it's very, very fragmented. And, an industry that's very, very fragmented could be more susceptible to have, spurts of some bad actors showing up rather than an industry that's dominated by, four firms and 75% of the market share. So I think we need to, be aware of that in these fragmented industries, you're going to see pockets like brush fires here and there. But overall, I think the private capital actually plays a role in helping facilitate the cleaning up of that overall industry, as long as that private capital is aligning itself with the high quality law firms. The parts of private capital that could be a hindrance to the industry are when there's too much capital around and it's just going towards folks that are creating these situations like the DTLA. But I don't think we could totally avoid that. Just like, you're not going to go through in a somewhat related asset class, what's going on now in private credit, right? Private credit now, these asset classes or industries are cyclical. And you're going to go through cycles where a lot of capital comes into an industry, gets deployed, and then the next part of that cycle develops where there's too much capital. And when there's too much capital, it gets in the hands sometimes of folks that are not the best stewards of that capital. And like I said, you're seeing that in private credit. We saw that for a while in cryptocurrency. It tends to appear where there's a dearth of capital. And we've seen a lot of capital come into this industry, but I don't think at the end of the day that is the cause. I actually think rather than it being the cause of some of these speed bumps, I think at the end of the day, the significant capital participants aligning with the high quality law firms is the best way forward for this industry.
Yeah, and Casey, I tend to take a little different view of the litigation funding industry than a lot of people because I don't feel like it's new, right? I feel like it's been around a very, very long time because when I look at this, right, I represent a client, right? So if I represent a client, it's me and him, and we're making a claim against the defendant and their, and their defense attorney, right? If I reach outside the box of myself and my client to get any kind of funding to help bring that claim, that's litigation finance. That's how I bring it forward. Let's look at the defense, right? We got the defense attorney. He's sitting in the box with the defendant, right? Who's paying those costs? It's not the defendant or the defense attorney. It's a multi-billion-dollar insurance company that's paying everything. They have been funding all the litigation expenses on the defense forever. They've been making tons and tons of money. Litigation finance has existed on the defense forever. They get to take a cost no object approach at the defense. And then suddenly, once we've got some money on the plaintiff side to level the playing field, suddenly this isn't fair, right? You shouldn't be financing the plaintiff side. Only the defense should get outside financing. Only the defense should be able to rely on a billionaire to pay for experts and do everything necessary to bring a case to trial. Why in the hell has it gotten to some sort of scenario where people feel like it's now unfair for the plaintiff to tap this same sort of revenue to level the playing field? I feel like it's been out there forever on the defense side.
I think it's a result of something else that's been out there for a long time. That part of the population being the insurance industry and the insurance lobby is very powerful. And I think they're very organized, and I think they know how to get the message out about plaintiff attorneys, about litigation finance. And, they seem to be doing a good job of it. Now, that I agree with you, Stan. That's really who's on the other side. And it's been a total mismatch in terms of resources allocated to each case and each litigation. And I also agree with you that the private capital that comes in via litigation finance is not used to imbalance the playing field. It's balancing the playing field. And why is that wrong? But I think we could do a better job on the plaintiff side and the litigation finance side collectively in getting that message out. And, I think some of that was forced into action this past summer, in the summer of 25, when, there was a bill that was floated, or a piece of the appropriations, meetings that was floated by Senator, I believe, from North Carolina.
Tom Tillis,
taxing an excise tax on the industry, which seemed to be something that would be tough to get approved unless it was inserted like it was, 10 or 11 days before the July 4th deadline that President Trump wanted that signed by. But I think during that time frame, I think some of the senior industry participants, particularly on the litigation finance side, did a good job, and we really coalesced around that. But on an ongoing basis, I think it makes for more of that effort going forward, a coalition to really, offset some of the messaging that's been brought to the table by the insurance lobbies.
What's the message? We're providing access to the courts?
The message is that this is an industry that is helping to balance the playing field, not to make it an imbalance. It's an imbalance already. And as Stan mentioned, it's an imbalance in favor of the defense and in the imbalance in favor of the insurance companies. But this is an opportunity for folks to get a balanced opportunity at justice. And I think you could also utilize some facts around, portfolios of investments that some of the finance folks have. Like when we get asked, so you've been investing in various different asset classes, but you invest in litigation finance. It's a litigious society, and how do you feel about being involved in that? And how do you feel about if there was any like press coverage about what you invest in? And I actually look forward to that, and I answer that with that comment, that I look forward to those questions, because the way that I think about this industry, the way that I think about law from the plaintiff lawyer's view from our lens is, it's very simple. I look around the portfolio that we have in terms of where we have exposures, where we've deployed capital. And I say to ourselves, what parts of the population are we invested in? What parts of the population are we on the same side of the playing field? What side of the population are we involved with the representation of that part of the population? And the answers are the following: veterans who risk their lives to protect all of us and all of our ancestors, stationed at a Marine base where they were contaminated by water systems, and the result was various types of cancers, Parkinson's disease, deaths, birth defects. Other parts of that portfolio, agricultural workers working 20 or 30 years, applying product that had carcinogens or chemicals that led to Parkinson's disease and other cancers. Never told about that. The defendants in those cases knew about that and never disclosed that to these folks that for 20 and 30 years are deploying that product. Sexual abuse, big growing part of our exposure to this industry. The vast majority of those cases, those victims were minors at the time. People that were exposed to asbestos and led to mesothelioma, which led to their death, or it led to mesothelioma, which will lead to their death, or lung cancer. Folks that are in need of surgeries, maybe emergency surgeries, resulting from an event where the defendant is liable for, and those folks can't afford these needed surgeries, where they don't, and or they don't have medical coverage. Someone needs traumatic brain injury. They're in a horrific car accident. No coverage, can't afford it. We fund those types of surgeries. So the point is that when I look around our portfolio and I see what part of the population that we're invested with, that is the reason why litigation finance is a benefit. And it's a benefit to society. It's a benefit to people getting justice. It's a benefit to people who deserve justice more than anyone, receiving an equal chance as the defense to receive justice. And that's a question that I really look forward to getting asked about. Yeah, because that's my answer. Not only are we in this industry as a participant, as an investor, there's a side benefit from being involved in this industry. And that's what I just described. And I don't mean to sound corny about this job that I have or this business that we're involved in. I think you all get the same benefit. And I hear it from you and your peers. And just like when I was describing earlier, the best plaintiff lawyers, we've learned. We didn't know this from day one, but we've learned, it's lawyers that have tried cases to verdict, have won verdicts. It's not just lawyers that, settle every single case that comes into the door. But these top lawyers and law firms that we're fortunate to work with, they treat these cases, 25 years into their career, like it's their first case. The passion for justice for their clients is amazing to see. It's amazing to be part of.
Amazing answer. Such a long answer. I have no idea what we even asked you, but it was an amazing answer. Stan, I was about to cut you off. I apologize.
No, you didn't. It was kind of the right answer. And you hit most of the points I was talking about, because there's a lot of inequities that existed on the plaintiff side prior to this, right? And the public doesn't necessarily see that, okay, if you're a firm with 500 cases in litigation and you've got to put, let's say, $10,000 into each one of those cases, that's $5 million you've got to lay out on the streets before you get $1 back in, right? And if you're just a firm that's starting, where does that money come from? You can't, it's not like an auto dealer where, hey, I've got a car in my inventory, I can borrow against it because it's an asset and I can use that to advertise and sell. We're a very unique industry, and the playing field was unleveled because defense firm on day one has $1 billion insurance company behind them to pay every single cost they've got. That's not that a defense firm retaining the experts. They're not funding this. Plaintiff firm doesn't have that same benefit until we get litigation finance. And it's been such a pet peeve of mine that people suddenly are looking at us like we're doing something wrong. Right? Go ahead, make the defense attorney fund the defense. We will fund the plaintiff side and see how that works out for the defense.
Great point, Stan. That's always that question always comes up too, or the point comes up that the defense is going to bring it up to the judge and air out a dirty laundry to the court that we're taking funding. Which by the way, I don't give a fuck about it. Who cares? We take funding, but how come no one ever asked the defense, like, where are you getting your funding? Like Roblox, the lawyers, Cooley, where are they getting their fund? Like, who's making those decisions? And there's always the implication that the funder's making the legal decisions. So let's talk about that. That's the elephant in the corner of the room that they always want to state on the record that, or at least imply, maybe it's not said oftentimes, but they want to insinuate that Casey Gard and GFO Asset Management, they're finding this case, they're actually making the legal decisions, which we both know is pure bullshit. But how come no one ever asked that from the defense angle, Stan?
Well, because it's clear that the defense funders are making the legal decisions. I'll say it unequivocally on here.
But why is it any less ethical? Where Casey isn't making? I mean, I've worked with Casey for years. He never sits there and says, "Hey, Matt, I want you to do this, that, and the other." He's more of like, "What's going on in the case? How's everything going? What's the latest and greatest? That's great, or that sucks. Okay, I got to report back to my investor." He doesn't sit there and say, "Matt, I need you to do X, Y, and Z in discovery. I need you to not sell this case and go try it because I want more money." I never heard those words out of his mouth. I don't know. I'm sure there's bad apples. Like there's bad apples in there's bad cops, bad firefighters, bad individuals in finance. There's crooked folks everywhere. I'm sure there are some crooked folks in the legal finance industry. No different than there's crooked folks in the defense side. No different than there's crooked folks in the plaintiff bar. Welcome to DTLA. But how come the defense has never asked that from an ethics perspective, Stan?
I have no idea. And here's the thing, too. It's not even just bad actors. Sometimes it's desperate actors, people who aren't bad, but they just don't have access to the funds they need to bring this case forward. What are they supposed to do? And, that problem doesn't exist in the defense. It's benefited the defense. They've been able to. So it's the insurance company spin on this stuff. Hey, now you're not funding cases. Casey's not creating torts. Casey's not running over people out there. Casey's not harming people, right? There is nobody that's got a claim that did not have a claim before litigation funding was involved. It has not created a single claim. It's raised awareness.
They'll claim it does. They'll claim it does.
No, it raises awareness, right? And raising awareness hurts the defense, so they got to figure out a way to make it look bad. You're not creating claims. You're raising awareness about claims, which brings more claims and may sort of have that look, but it's completely different, right? In order to get compensated, the claim has to be legitimate. The claim has to be successful. You got to be able to go to court and win. Right? If Casey funds a bunch of cases that are illegitimate losers, Casey's losing money, right? We're not making money. You're not making money. It behooves nobody, right? To push forward illegitimate claims or create claims that weren't otherwise there, because created claims are not compensable claims. Compensable claims are not claims you want to invest in, and no one wants to be there. So, I kind of think it's a self-policing industry. It's, people who are funding don't want the bullshit any more than we do. Right. It's an assistant to us, much the way the insurance company has been assisting the defense attorneys in giving them the financial support they need to do what's right on behalf of their clients. We're just there now.
Hey, Matt and Stan, some of the points that you mentioned are interesting in the sense that, when we talk about, plaintiffs lawyers are receiving litigation finance funding, and that effectively is private capital, right? What industry in this country or in this world doesn't receive capital? So it's as if we're asking the question, why is plaintiffs lawyers receiving litigation funding? Why are they receiving private capital? It should be, why wouldn't they be? Because every industry receives capital. Every company, every industry has a capital structure. And just like you mentioned, who's funding the defense law firms? They might have a credit facility from the banks. They might have a credit facility from private capital. The insurance companies do. Technology companies do. Every industry and company does, and inclusive of certain industries that previously weren't able to access private capital towards, say, like the equity side, like the accounting industry and what we've seen. And there's been changes to the structures there that now allow private capital in, or even in medical practices. So it's almost as if we should say, not why does plaintiffs' lawyers benefit from litigation funding? Why wouldn't they? Every other industry, every other company out there has a capital structure. Most of them have access to private capital, including the defense firms. I would also add that not only why wouldn't they, access to capital for plaintiffs' firms has actually levels have been, say, degraded since global financial crisis, where you had changes implemented at, like banking level, for instance, Dodd-Frank and other, bills that were passed that limited the amount of capital that banks could loan contingency valued assets. So if we think about it from this lens, all of the firms that we all work with and work in, the fees that are earned are success-based fees, contingency fees, right? So when a plaintiff firm goes to the bank and says, we'd like use a round number, $100 million credit facility. Now they have to show their financial statements, their balance sheet. The whole right side of their balance sheet, or the vast majority of the asset side of their balance sheet, is their docket of cases. And those docket of cases are cases that they're working on contingency fees. So they're facing the bank with a balance sheet that is vastly dominated with contingency valued assets, the exact type of asset that the banks, I believe, have been restricted in the amount that they could lend to, less now than before the global financial crisis. So I would argue that plaintiff law firms, mass tort law firms, personal injury law firms working on contingencies have less opportunity to access capital from the banking system than they did before the global financial crisis. That's not right either.
And far less than the defense has. Defense has access to capital. They can show that they're getting retainers. It's just revolving.
Yes. Great.
We have to wait for an event to actually occur, and that event has to go right because it's contingent. Great point. That's
the last part of your comments that was important in the context of what we're describing is, litigation finance, funding companies, even, and that has evolved, right? It's evolved with the ability now for alternative business structures and those which we could get into in a few minutes. But we are aware that we are not allowed to, sort of force or dictate strategy. And for the sole reason that if those are the rules and regulations, we need to abide by those rules and regulations. And, we've operated in the finance arena for all these years. I would say, 20, 25 plus years where we've been regulated by the SEC. So compliance is something that, whether it was at our long short equity business, some private equity funds we run, even in our family office, compliance is something that we take very seriously. And at the end of the day, we're used to, doing our best to make sure we are compliant with rules and regulations. That said, from an investing lens, my view on, our input on strategy on a trial, why the heck would we want to input our thoughts on strategy in a trial if we're doing a good job in what we say, where we are trying to work with the highest quality law firms and lawyers? I look at it a little bit differently where, and this has been throughout my career, where whatever sector, whatever industry we're talking about for an investment, and that's really the way we look at litigation finance. Like over the 30 years, we've had analyst teams in various different sectors. And those are the experts. They have industry experience. They've been covering that industry for many years. And I've always said that, in our research meetings, I've always wanted to surround myself with people that are smarter than me, that I can learn from. And I used to joke around, but I was underlying it. I was serious. I want to be the dumbest one in the room in our research meetings. And when we started investing in litigation finance, it wasn't that, Casey Gard and his teammates here are fancying themselves as lawyers. No, we have, in our litigation finance strategy, half of the employees, half of the teammates are legal professionals, 5 lawyers, case intake managers, paralegals, case managers. And it's as if we just added another sector, another industry that we invest in. And those are the experts. So those are the folks, both internally, but more importantly, the folks that we're working with externally that are working those cases. Those are those experts that I want to learn from it and let them handle the case, because that's what they have the expertise in. Let them run the strategy, let them, as the rules state, but also as an investor, why would I be investing with law firm ABC if I was going to sit here and say that I should give them my thoughts on strategy? No, I'm investing with them because they're best of breed. They're one of the best environmental law firms, or they're one of the best sex abuse law firms, or they're one of the best personal injury firms. That's what they do best. That's one of the things that's attracted our capital to them, our sort of partnership with them. And that's been, the way that we've looked at investing for many, many years is there's going to be experts, and those experts on each industry are really the ones that lead that work on that industry. We might have a good talent for managing risk and allocating capital and knowing how to size up investments, sizing up risk. But when it comes to the litigating of the cases and trying the cases, we certainly, not only because we're adhering to rules, we take a back seat to the real experts in that area.
Well said. We're coming up on the the hour. We're going to wrap this episode up. As we leave, just a couple of thoughts. One, do the Knicks have a shot this year? Does St. John's have a shot? Those are my two teams. I would say St. John's is one of your teams. You don't have an affinity for an actual NBA team, but what does it look like out there? Because the other area of expertise Casey has is basketball. For those who don't know, that's his thing.
I think the East has reemerged as a competitor, perhaps superior to the Western Conference this year. But I think that the possibilities are a bit wide open on the East. And I think the Knicks are one of those teams in there. The one area that I think they could use a bit more of is their bench. I think they could use another one or two effective, parts of that rotation. But I do think they have a shot. When it comes to St. John's, I would say, and I must be transparent about the fact that I am very biased there because the coach of St. John's, Rupatino, has been a long-time close friend. Yeah. And I look at him, just like I mentioned earlier, with certain law firms and lawyers in their particular areas of expertise. That is the definition of best of breed in his profession. So because of that alone, I think St. John's has a good chance this year. I also, in terms of momentum and peaking at the right time or the wrong time, I think they're peaking at a good period of time now as we head into the tournament. So those would be two feelings on the Knicks and St. John's. I think they both have a shot this year.
They look good today. St. John's advanced. I think that they're possibly a final. They're Elite Eight. I don't know about Final Four. Elite Eight. They should make it to whatever bracket they're in, whatever area, to the finals. And
Matt, instead, can I just mention one or two things as part of this, and as part of, we keep talking about evolution of, say, litigation finance, but
yeah, your closing thoughts. Sure.
There's also something that's been very apparent to me. I've had a front row seat in observing this, but since we last spoke 2 years, and since we even met maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago, the evolution of Dolman Law Group is also something to be acknowledged. And this is a firm that has evolved into a national presence where they are involved on leadership committee of multiple mass torts. They are involved at the most senior level in various sex abuse lawsuits, sexual exploitation lawsuits. and also a voluminous amount of the traditional personal injury cases. So that growth, the quality of their growth, has been great to watch. And like I said, Matt doesn't, make that point in his humble way, but Matt and Stan are folks also that have evolved, and their firm has evolved. And like I said, it's been great to watch. And when I look at that firm, even though they've really evolved and grown in the past 2-3 years, it just has all of the feeling that this is early innings for them. And that's even more exciting to think about.
KCG, love you, bro. I know Stan feels the same way, so it's it's ditto. We love working with you. You've been besides being a great friend and probably doing more for me than any adult male in my entire life. You've also done a lot for the firm, so we 100% greatly appreciate you, and you've been very selfless. And I'm like another member of your family. I'm the redhead stepchild, but I'm part of your family. I don't look like the guards. I'm not, I don't look fancy and beautiful. They all look like they're out of an Abercrombie and Fitch catalog. I look like the runt, like like they adopted me clearly. I'm not from the lineage, but if you look at Casey and Melissa Gard, they look like models, and I look like the big-eared like freak that they just they adopted, but they gave a nice home to, and they feed me well, and I appreciate that, Casey. So thank you very much. Stan, I know Stan feels the same way. We couldn't be more thankful for obviously our relationship with you.
Hey Stan, I'm sort of thinking on the fly as some of these items come up, but in terms of messaging across, when we talk about just the evolution of Dolman Law Group and say our involvement with you all, if you just think about it and you think about folks that are looking at litigation finance and plaintiff law and plaintiff law firms, and that combination, is that something that should be allowed? Is that something that should be allowed to grow? And then I think about, again, we're in business, we work, we deploy capital, we look to make returns on that capital. You all deploy your resources, your IP, your legal expertise, and once successful, your attorney's fees. But in addition to that, not only are you pushing for justice for the people that deserve it most, more recently, what has developed is the next chapter of this growth in the industry and this growth together in this relationship. Moving on to different philanthropic organizations, charities, affiliated with the exact causes, the exact injuries, the exact circumstances that these victims are going through. And I think that is something else that could show. And this isn't just someone or some folks here on this podcast just writing checks. These are folks on weekends, whether it's volunteering or showing up, helping out. And those are just some of the things that lead me to think that folks that are against capital and plaintiff law firms working together to help their clients achieve justice don't get the full picture. And all of that messaging could improve now, but that's another part that's been great to sort of be part of you guys and some of the other firms that we're privileged to work with. So now I don't mean to run on about other items, but it just
good points.
It just comes up. This isn't, like I said, this isn't groups of firms that are just out there looking to settle a case to cash a check on their fees. These are firms that rather go to trial because they know they could get a better decision. These are firms that, after they're done going to trial, get involved with various organizations supporting the very people that they were just representing. So there is so much more that could be discussed about these industries and these industries working together. And I think, we'll all be part of that discussion going forward.
Well said. And really appreciate you coming on today. I'm going to close this just with a couple of thoughts. Is that it's the problem with also our industries is so politicized, and I tend to fall very moderate Mine are two more conservative, but most of my fellow brethren are very liberal. The biggest issue we have as plaintiff lawyers is our lobbying board is the AAJ, and they're amazing group. But when we're trying to work across the aisle, and we had this issue today, it came up when we were in a Roblox meeting. When you work across the aisle, the Republicans don't want to hear from AAJ because the three bastions of the Democratic Party are, trial lawyers, teachers union, and labor union. And as soon as you come in, they don't want to hear. They just look at us as the enemy. Trial lawyers that has that pejorative tone, that stench, that smell, and that's the issue. And I don't think that issue is going to go away because when Republicans look at litigation funding, even though we might agree with them on many issues, they look at litigation funding as a creature of trial lawyers, and this benefits trial lawyers who only benefit the Democratic Party. And that's an issue that's not going away and probably will come up on a second episode of the Casey Gard Dolman Law Group podcast. But, to wrap it up, I want to thank you, Casey, for coming on. You've been very selfless with your time. Thank you, as always, Stan, for co-hosting this with me. This has been another wonderful episode of the David and Goliath podcast. Thank you and have a blessed day.
Thank you.